Hello everyone. I'll continue the series on the French defense with the advanced variation, which is, I believe, one of the simplest ways for white to play, and there's not as much theory as in other moves which white could choose on move 3, and I think this is an okay variation to start with against the French, as opposed to the Tarrasch or the classical. So e4, e6, d4, d5, and here is where white decides whether he is going for the classical, for the Tarrasch, for the exchange, or for the advance. And if he plays the move e5, so advancing the pawn, this is now the advanced French. And the point of this variation is that white is trying to gain space as soon as possible, and both sides have their common problems in the French defense, and this variation, the advanced variation, actually amplifies the significance of the plans for both sides. And the pawn structure is highlighted as well. And this is, in fact, the classical French pawn structure in which the bishop is bad, in which black is looking for f6 and c5, and white is looking for f4, f5, and trying to attack on the king side. I would like to say just that if you are unfamiliar with the theory, basic theory of the French defense, I have made a video, introductory video to the French defense. I have linked it in the description below, and I will also link all the other variations I have made detailed videos on. So if you are unfamiliar with the theory, check out those first, and this video is going to focus only on the advanced French. Now in this position, black has tried several moves, but there is one and only one move which is considered good here, and that's c5. Immediately trying to seek counterplay and expanding on the queen side, looking for a pawn break and challenging white's central structure and the weak d4 pawn. So c5 is basically the only move that you should ever play. The only other option that seems okay, which might be a good surprise weapon, which definitely not many people will be prepared for, is the move b6. Now the problem with b6 is that it doesn't give black that much counterplay, and black isn't as fast to equalize. Now to b6, white will most commonly reply with c3, now queen to d7, knight to f3, knight to e7, a4, a5. This is the position you might get, in which white has a slight edge, about 0.4 according to the engines, and he can't play his normal French defense plan, of playing against the French defense with the advance. So if your opponent is not well versed in the theory of this, it might be a good weapon. However, if your opponent doesn't know what he is doing, then b6 on move 3 is a mistake. So after e5, you should only play c5, and the next moves are basically forced, and you will very seldom see deviations from this. So to this, white plays c3, reinforcing the d4 pawn with the pawn. Of course, he could defend with the piece, but that would be a bad choice, because if black takes, then any other capture done by the pawn would be inferior for white. To this, the main move for black, by far the main move, is knight to c6. And once again, this is the only move that keeps equality. And the fact that black has already equalized on move 4 means that there is something wrong with this variation for white, but that's really not true. The position is simply equal, and knight to c6 is the only move that equalizes. Instead of knight to c6, as a surprise weapon on move 4, you could try the move queen to b6. Now this is only slightly better for white. If you ask the engines, it's 0.1 or 2. But it could surprise your opponent because it's a different move order. Now it will most likely transpose to the main line anyway, but it might be a good strategy to confuse your opponent. To queen to b6, white should play knight to f3, then knight to c6, a3, c4, and you have now transposed to the main line, which could come from the normal move order as well. So c3. Don't play queen to b6 if you are unfamiliar with the move order. Play knight to c6, this is the main move, and now white will always play knight to f3. And this is where the variation starts. This is where the advanced variation branches out. And there are three options for black in this position. Three good moves. There are several others which are not as good, so I'm not going to show them. And we are going to talk about the three main ideas. Now this variation is called the Paulsen attack as well, advanced variation Paulsen attack, but it's basically known as the main line. So if you see somewhere French defense advanced variation Paulsen attack, this is it after the move knight to f3. Okay, the three options for black are on move 5. Firstly, queen to b6. This is the most aggressive one and the most complicated line. The second option black has, is the Uba attack, the bishop to d7 on move 5. And the third option that has gained in popularity in the last 10 or 20 years, I would say, is knight to h6. And all three are good, all three are different, and we are going to go over them in this video. So first let me go over the Uba variation with bishop to d7. Now, this variation is, I would say, the most passive way for black to play. You are giving white too much of a free hand, in my opinion, and even though it's probably the most solid way, it can't give you that much counterplay. To bishop to d7, white replies with bishop to e2, knight g to e7, trying to develop and getting the knight into f5, which is the main idea of knight to h6 as well. Now knight to a3 will be played by white, and the main idea of knight to a3 is to reinforce the d4 pawn with the move knight to c2. In this position, white could have also castled. Those are the two main options. I think knight to a3 is the more common one. And if white castles, black shouldn't aim to go for knight to f5. Black should play knight to g6, and this is more comfortable, and it will give you more attacking options. With the queen coming in, you could exchange these knights and try to attack this way. And I think knight to g6 is a better attacking move if white castles here. But if white doesn't castle, that means that he isn't committing his king yet, and that he hasn't given you the address of his king yet. So if he plays knight to a3, you should be more careful. And playing knight to g6 is a very committal move in this position, because if white doesn't castle kingside, then you have overextended your pieces and your knight is misplaced. So after knight to a3, you should play the move c takes d4. This is very flexible and it's resolving some of the central tension. C takes d4, and here, I mean, the best move is knight to f5, and this is the most commonly played move, but it could backfire as well. Now, I think that ideas such as g4 could work here. If you are white, if you are playing a lower rated opponent, you should be careful with ideas like that. But let's say g4 immediately, it's perhaps, you can see the engine evaluation on the right side of the board. I have played this myself, in blitz games especially, and I think it's a good way to confuse the issue, but it might be double-edged. So of course, if knight h4, queen h4, black is supposed to be better here, but you have a very aggressive setup, and the move such as bishop to f4 could definitely bring you something close to practical equality, if not equality engine-wise as well. And I think that white stands a great chance here, despite being worse. So just remember that after the move knight to f5, you have an aggressive option of playing g4, but in a tournament game against a stronger opponent, that might be unwise. So the best move is knight to c2, simply reinforcing the d4 pawn, getting the knight back into the game. And here black will most commonly play queen to b6, increasing the pressure on b2, increasing the pressure on d4, and white will castle. And this is the starting position of the Uba variation in the advanced French, if both sides know what they are doing. Now, what I would advise is that after the move bishop to d7 for black, whether you are playing this with black or trying to fight this defense with white, you should try some uncommon ideas such as the move knight to g4 the move g4 on move 9. And there are a few possibilities like that earlier on in the position and later on in the position. And you should, instead of, let's say, knight to c2 here and queen b6 castles, try to find some uncommon ideas for either side and try to use them. So just remember that after knight to f3, which is the starting position of the advance, this will be played in 99% of the games. If you play bishop to d7, this is the Uba variation, and your plan is, if you are white, to develop normally. If you are black, you have to decide what you are doing with your knight on e7, whether you are playing knight to g6 or knight to f5, which will depend on if and when white castles. You can always resolve this tension with c takes d4. That's never a mistake in the position. C takes d4. So if you have to waste a move, you can do that. And after that, it will be easier to play. Knight to f5 could be played here if white doesn't castle. If white castles on move 7, then you should go for a plan with knight to g6. Okay, so let's go back to this position. After knight to f3, the rare continuation which is gaining in popularity and which might confuse you if you are white, if you are not prepared, and which might be a great way for black to play against the advanced French, is the move knight to h6, which is preparing to play knight to f5 simply and preparing to increase pressure on white's position without using up the square that the bishop could use later on. Now, bishop to d3 is the most common idea, simply preparing to capture the knight on f5, and that's as simple as that. Now, cd4, knight to f5, and this you don't have to take, but the best move is to take the knight, and you should take it in this position. Bishop takes f5, e takes f5, knight to c3, reinforcing your central control and attacking the now weak and isolated d5 pawn, which black is going to have trouble with, but in exchange for that, black has gained the bishop pair. After knight to c3, black should play bishop to e6, defending or over-defending for now the d5 pawn. h4 should be your move if you are white, and this is the most aggressive move, and black should play h6. I'm sorry, my dog is restless. He seems to be restless. Hi. I'm sorry for that. I'm just going to try to calm him down for a second. Okay. So after the move bishop to e6, where black is defending the d5 pawn, I think that white should go for a plan of h4 and then h5. And if black does nothing to stop that, then he's just going to be worse. And I think this is also providing a useful outpost for the bishop on the square g5. And if black doesn't play h6, then white is simply better, much better. Now, if you don't want to play as aggressively, and if you want to try to exploit your advantage in the center slowly, there are other moves in this position. You can play knights to e2, you can play castles, you can play a3. Those are all okay. I think knight to e2 could be the best plan. And that with the move knight to e2, you are reinforcing d4, you're going to castle, you are going to transfer the bishop here or here, and you will have a safer plan of advancing in the position. So this is the move knight to h6, which is fairly straightforward, and if you face that from black, then you know what to do. Just play bishop to d3, black is commonly going to exchange the pawns, cd4, cd4, and after knight to f5 happens, then you are going to capture on f5. Now taking on h6 could be played, but I don't think that it's a good idea to give up your dark squared bishop, because your light squared bishop has a weak counterpart in the French defense, and especially if the pawn is on f5. But if you give up your dark squared bishop, then immediately the move such as a move such as bishop to b4 check could be a problem. So I don't think that's as advisable, and the advantage you get structurally with black's pawns being doubled on h6 and h7 isn't that significant. So I would advise you not to take on h6. Okay, let's go back. After knight to f3, so we went over bishop to d7 and knight to h6. The most common move by far is queen to b6, and this is continuing the main line or the Paulsen attack in the advanced French. Now, white pretty much has one move which is the best. There are two more sidelines which white could go for. Let's go over them first. Firstly, bishop to e2. That's a fairly passive move, and I don't think that white has enough advantage with that move. This is just all zeros. Now the position continues cd4, cd4, knight to h6, knight to c3, knight to f5, and black is perfectly fine. He has increased pressure on the d4 pawn, and black has a lot of counterplay. Now if you want to activate in this position, once again, ideas such as g4 are okay, but you are going to have to play a3, eventually stop the knight from coming in. You are going to have some problems, and I think black has too much activity, and even though the move is not bad, I think this shouldn't be played if you want to go for a win. So this is bishop to e2. After queen to b6, there's another move, which I think is okay, but not the best. That's bishop to d3. And in this position, cd4 would be played, c takes d4. Of course, if knight takes d4 is played, then of course, black is simply losing. That can't be taken. Knight d4, knight d4. If queen d4, then bishop to b5 check, so that doesn't work. So after c takes d4, black is going to play bishop to d7, firstly stopping this check, and then this will work. And you are going to have to play bishop to e2 to defend the pawn. And once again, I think this is too passive to play for a huge advantage, and I think that this shouldn't be played. So these are bishop to e2 and bishop to d3 on move 6 for white. So after queen to b6, on move 6, white should play the move a3, and this is simply preparing to advance on the queen side, and it's also stopping any piece from entering the b4 square after cd4 happens. Here white is giving black two options, and black has two options which are good. I think both are good, and the main move, the main line, is c4. This is the main line of the advanced variation, and this will be played in most of your games. Now with this move, black is expanding on the queen side as much as he can, and he's also stopping white from developing normally. Now you can already see that the white knight hasn't got that many squares, that it will have to work hard to develop, and the bishop isn't that good on this diagonal. It doesn't have that many targets. After c4, white should nevertheless play knight b to d2. Knight to a5 will be played by black, and now this move is trying to exploit the weakness of the outpost black has already created here on b3. Now to this, white will play bishop to e2, developing, bishop to d7, castles, knight to e7, rook to b1, queen to c7. This is the starting position, and here black can try with ideas of b5, b4 even. He can play knight to c6, b5, a5, then b4, and try to create a passed pawn on the queen side. Now you can already see that you can see that in the introductory video. Once again, if you are unfamiliar with the basic ideas in the French, I would advise you to watch that first. But you should follow your pawn chain, which is going to tell you which way you should be attacking. Now, the way your pawn chain is facing is the way you should be attacking. So it's clear that black should expand on the queen side and that white should expand on the king side. Now, this variation, even though it's not worse for white, it gives black more options to advance. And of course, white could play h3, knight h2, f4, f5. White could play knight d1, f4, f5, and then knight back to f3. There are several possibilities for white to attack, but black has the chance to advance slightly faster. And the position is completely equal, that should be said once again, and the position is very rich. I think this is, despite being easy to play for both sides and the plans being clear, I think that the games produced could be a lot of fun, and that this variation is worth exploring, and that it could be fun for both sides. So this is with the move c4 for black on move 6. Now the other option after the move a3 is the move knight to h6. Now, I'm not sure how to pronounce this variation. It's written Lputian variation. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm sorry if it's from your language area and I've mispronounced it. But the point of this variation is that the knight is once again trying to come to f5. And white, since black has allowed the move b4, is going to play b4, because the move c4 that black played in the main line is designed pretty much to stop b4, and if b4 is played after c4, then of course en passant works and black is winning a pawn and winning the game. But after the move knight h6, white does have time to play b4, and now white has managed to stop black's expansion significantly. Now the best move in this position is cd4. You should never take the b pawn, because then white would have a huge advantage in the center, and after cb4, ab4, white is completely winning strategically and positionally. So c takes d4, knight to f5, putting a lot of pressure on the d4 pawn, now attacking it 3 times. Bishop to b2. After b4, you are free to fianchetto your bishop, and now this bishop isn't that active, and I think this is the biggest downside of this variation for white, because the bishop is pretty useless for the next 3 moves. Bishop d7, g4 should be played here, and this justifies the slow bishop on b2. This justifies allowing black to pressure d4 as much, because white has a clear plan of attack, and I think this is very fun for white and very aggressive, and a very aggressive way to play. So if black plays knight to h6 on move 6 instead of c4, you shouldn't despair, you should be happy, because you are going to have an attacking game. So b4, you have to use the opportunity to play that now. cd4, knight f5, bishop b2, bishop d7, g4, chase the knight away. Now the knight is going to go to e7 in almost all games. There are no more logical moves. and you're going to play knight to c3. And now you can already see that the game is shaping up, and you can see what the plan of attack is. White is doing the same thing he's doing normally in the French defense, expanding on the king side, and black isn't really doing that much. Black hasn't been attacking yet. And one downside is that black will almost always have time for the move f6. And now I would like to tell you which side it's normal to castle, but I really can't. There isn't really an easy way for me to explain what the plan should be in this position, and I think that you should decide that for yourself. Now, you could be surprised with what the most common move is in this position, and that's knight to a5. Now, knight to a5 has been played about 100 times. The highest rated game was Vasily Ivanchuk, Bareev, Evgeny, and to this you should play queen to c2, and I'm going to show, of course, if you take, then the bishop is falling, and the black is quick to exploit the fact that the c4 square is weak, so white should be careful with such an expansion, and black has counterplay. But I think white stands a great positional chance and a slight advantage despite black being able to put the knight on c4. So this is just one idea which you could find in the position. After knight to c3, normal developing move. If white is unprepared for this position, you might scare him with the move knight to a5. And if knight to c4 happens, bishop c4, dc4, then you have a passed pawn, then the position is fairly scary. You could try queen to c7 before playing knight to a5, but of course then the bishop wouldn't be dropping, so that doesn't work. So we have to find some nuances in the position which could allow you perhaps that after knight to c4, bishop c4, you can take with the rook, you can reinforce the pawns in some other way. And the position is very rich, and I will advise you to look at games by strong French defense players. I'm going to link some in the description below, and the best way to learn this is to try and reach some critical positions such as this one. Don't use the engine, never use the engine when trying to find opening ideas, but try to think of 5 or 6 different plans and then try to find whether any strong grandmasters have been playing them. If nobody has ever played that, find where you went wrong. If somebody has played it, find how they improved on your ideas. And this is the way to master an opening. And that's it. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you got something from this video on the advanced French, and stay tuned for more chess. Thanks very much. Bye.